Hi, equipped parents. It's Robin Cooper introducing you to the poetry section of our class for year 3, 2024 to 2025. This class is for 7th to 9th graders. They don't have to have a prerequisite in poetry to do the poetry section with me. I'm going to do another video that's directly for your students as well as you, but this video is just for you. I'm just doing this video to prepare you with your organization so you can wrap your arms about what is up and coming. In the video that I provide for your students, I'll also share why would you even study poetry. But right now, let me just prepare you. We are going to cover a variety of poems in the 19th and 20th centuries. We're doing a matchup with where we are in cycle 4 of Claritas. Last year, if you were with Equip 222, your students have memorized and just presented poems that they memorized, and they used an IEW resource for that. This year, we're going to enjoy poetry on another level, getting into analysis and meaning of poems. I may edit what you can see here, but what I have is a session schedule. Let me start from the top. An overview, what you can print from home, instructions just for me that will disappear, a session schedule, a reading plan, and a guide for your poetry decisions. Let me tell you what's here. We're going to be reading and enjoying 5 to 6 poems per session. I am calling a session 2 months. We will be analyzing, memorizing, and writing about 1 poem and 1 poet per session for a total of 4 poets and poems in the school year. Every analysis for every poem that I have mentioned to you is available in a folder on Google Drive that you will have access to. We have these in, let's see, you can see my drive here, but we have these all available for you here. I'm going to show you what is in one of the guides. This one is a guide for Tonight I Can Write, Pablo Neruda. All of the poetry analyses have this type of information in it. You've got a cover sheet with the central message and the speaker, themes, emotions, topics, the period, the form, and the genre. I don't expect that any of us are poetry experts, and I'm learning with you. In a poem analysis that comes from poemanalysis.com, by the way, there's a summary, the themes, the structure, literary devices, the analysis line by line. It's really honestly very good. The historical context of the poem, even reference tools to similar poetry and about the author, him or herself as well. So you will have access to those, and that will be like your answer key. Oh, in the guides, there's also a link to the poem itself that you could read online, just to make it easy for you. That is why I have done that. The guides, when they refer to a word like imagery or a lyric poem, for example, there's a link that will bring you to the definition. So you don't have to know these things ahead of time. I will get into poetry devices with your students, but in the beginning, you may not know some of these things. It's very advantageous just to have the link and click and see what does that mean. Okay, I have a section here called print, and I'm telling you ahead of time and showing you what you have access to in this course. If you want to print it all ahead of time and get it out of the way, that's kind of how I work. You can. If you want to print it as you go, that's up to you and your own organization style. Just don't come to class. Have your students come to class without the things that they need. That will be frustrating, and we don't have time to waste in the class together. So there is one thing called a poetry analysis worksheet. I will show it to you. This method of poetry analysis is called FLAME. You're going to look at form, language, analysis, meaning, and effects. Now, I don't expect that you know this right now. We're getting to that. That's why we're in class together. To work our way up to that, you'll see that I have given you some options. So when it comes to poetry analysis, you could start with a T-chart, you could move on to a simple graphic wall organizer, or get to an advanced graphic wall organizer. If your students are fresh out of the box analyzing poetry, or if they tend to get overwhelmed, start with the T-chart. It's honestly so simple. It looks like this. It's just list your comments about the poem on the left. Every comment has its own box. And when your student has questions, put those in the right-hand box. I want them to be able to bring their questions and their comments to you or to me. The next organizer looks like this. So this is very simple to follow. What's the overall message or theme? What do you notice? What do you wonder? And it's just 3 steps. And it's just 8 pages of the same thing. So you could print this once and use it for a while. The advanced graphic wall organizer looks like this, a little more dense. So if your student gets overwhelmed by too much information at one time, do not start with this one. The second 2 organizers, the simple graphic wall organizer and the advanced graphic wall organizer, are going to better prepare your students to use the flame method. So my suggestion is to, start with the T-chart, but if you need to, but really move on to the graphic wall organizers if you can. That's called scaling, being able to scale a class up or make it simpler for your students. And I've given you the same tools for scaling in your print options. For example, when it comes to learning poetic devices, I have given you some options. You could either print a document that they can fill out as I'm teaching, or you can print a document with the answers in it. If your children are distracted by writing and it's going to slow them down, then use the word wall with the answer keys on it. If your students have trouble paying attention and staying with me, then you might have them fill in the document as I'm teaching. So that's up to you. That's up to you. I also have a game that I'm providing you access to. I found this in Teachers Pay Teacher. Teachers Pay Teachers. This game will go over the poetic devices. There's 16 terms that they cover, and you can play this. I don't know if we'll play it in class, but you certainly can play it at home. 32 examples. Literary devices are not necessarily easy, so it's good to have some practice. There is also a poetry annotation bookmark that you can print. This is great because just use it as a reference tool for your students as they're going through the poem. They'll have a step-by-step. How do I annotate a poem? First, they're going to read it. Second, they're going to go through the poetic form. 3, they're going to look at poetic devices and then reread the poem. This one document will print 4 bookmarks. I suggest you have one for you and one for your student, or you could collaborate with other moms in the class and have one person print and possibly laminate that bookmark. I suggest you use cardstock, but that's my style. There is also an annotated lesson guide that they can print, just a worksheet that they can fill in when I'm speaking. If your child's distracted by writing, have them fill in the one with the answer key, have them print the one with the answer key for them, but sit them with a highlighter so that they can take notes as I'm teaching, because teaching works best when it's active. It requires active listening. Okay, so let's see. I have notes for myself of things that I want to do to prepare for teaching this class. Ignore that, that will disappear. Here is our session schedule. So we're going to work in 2-week blocks over a 2-month period of time for every one session. On the left-hand side, you see the weeks listed. On the top, you see the days. There are obviously not 4 days and 2 weeks. I'm planning this class so that your child will take 2 days every week to sit down with the poetry. You could divide it out in smaller bits if that works better for your student. If they work better with batch processing, to do a deep dive, to really get into it in just the one day, you could do it that way. But regardless, I'm trying to temper this out and help you pace the class for your students. In the first 2 weeks, I want them to read all the poems for that session. Read them out loud. They're going to choose their favorite one poem, single one poem. They have to have just one poem that's their favorite. In the next set of 2 weeks, which is weeks 3 and 4, all the way through week 7 and 8, they're going to recite their poem out loud every day. The goal is that they would memorize it. And then so in weeks 3 and 4, they're going to do their analysis. They're going to look at the form, meaning, language, and effects of the poem. I'm going to be teaching about that, so you don't have to know it right now. In the next 2 weeks, weeks 5 and 6, they're going to start investigating the author using the key individual chart that I provide them. The key individual chart looks like, this is from Principal Approach, and Danielle made it beautiful for us. It looks like this. So they're going to look at the person, the birth and death of the person, the source text, and record the Christian history, influences, character, and contributions of that person. And listen, not all of these poets are Christian. So you'll be able to discern that as you go. And that takes me to the next 2 weeks, weeks 5 and, we're in the weeks 5 and 6. You want to really look at, in the poetry, evidence of the author's bias. So I'm going to teach about biases. We want to understand how bias impacts worldview, and then what does God say about that bias and worldview. And in the last 2 weeks of this session, they will do a recitation on the poem. The recitation will change depending on how God is leading us, but it's the same method that you use for IEW in terms of writing a keyword outline, forming a rough draft, adding your stylistic techniques and dress ups, any decorations that you have, getting your editing done, and then producing a final draft. In the poetry reading plan section of this document, I give you the sessions broken down into 4 sections because we have 4 sessions, and I list the poems for you there. So your children in each session are going to read and be exposed to all of these poems, like, for example, Keats and Browning, Wadsworth, Elizabeth Barrett Browning, and Tennyson, but they're only going to analyze one every 2 months. I provide a section here called Poem Decisions, and that will give you a summary to help you decide which poet and poem your students are most interested in writing about and analyzing. And you may, as mom or dad, see a poem that you don't prefer, so you can guide your child away from that one and towards a different one. There are messages listed in each poem, like, for example, Ode to a Nightingale by Keats. The message is basically beauty and joy can provide a temporary escape from the pain of life. Maybe you don't agree with that. Maybe that's what your student wants to write about. Maybe you decide that the worldview of the author, maybe your student sees the worldview of the author as something that God would want to redirect and correct. So a recitation could be rewrite the expressions in the poem that would be more godly. You know, if you could sit down with the poet, what would you teach the poet? If you could write a letter to the poet, what would you have to say to that poet and why? So the recitations will change according to how God guides the year. This little outline, though, is just going to help you get started for organizing and thinking about how we will look at poetry in the year.